Hare Krishna, Hare Sorry, Prabhu. Please accept my
Uh,
humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Please accept my humble obeisances.
How are you
And,
this morning, or in your case, evening?
quite well, thank you very much.
Good,
Um,
good.
the weather in
I'd like to
Mayapur
just
is very
start
nice
with
at the moment.
a general topic announcement to our audience, and
Sure.
then I'll come back to you in a moment.
Okay. Fire
This
away.
is a continuing series of the GBC Strategic Planning Team. And what we're doing during this celebration of Srila Prabhupada's Disappearance Day is inviting 9 devotees to offer their realizations and their insights into a very, very important topic. And that is that Srila Prabhupada is the preeminent Siksha guru for all of ISKCON, not just today, but for all of the existence of ISKCON. And we have 3 sessions today. We just spent some time with Malati Devi. We're now spending time with you. When we're done together, we'll then invite Badri Narayan Maharaj at 7 a.m. Pacific time. Tomorrow, we have 3 devotees also. And then the day after, we have 3 more devotees. So we have 9 segments in this process of illuminating his divine grace as the preeminent Shiksha Guru. Part of what the SPT is doing is also helping devotees to become aware and cautious with this terrible COVID-19 disease. And so, of course, part of our service is to remind devotees that safe practices such as wearing a mask, keeping social distancing, washing their hands on a regular basis, and being very cautious with this disease is also part of what we're doing. So let's turn to you, Prabhu.
Right.
Maybe of course, you're a famous devotee, obviously, and your transcendental diaries have been read by thousands and thousands and thousands of devotees. And pretty much everybody knows you, but just tell us just briefly something about your past
There's
that might be interesting to the devotees.
okay. Well, thank you for the introduction, Prabhu. I'll give a short summary of my last 45 years. I was born and brought up in England, 1950. I left at the age of 20 to Australia. As soon as I arrived there, I met the devotees on the street selling back to Godheads. 10 months later, I was in the temple. I joined the temple. And 6 weeks later, Prabhupada came and I got initiated. So that was in April of 72. Since then, I've done a variety of services. I was fortunate to be in the right place at the right time when Prabhupada came to Delhi in November 1975. I was asked to do his massage. That later on extended to the full servant's duties, and I spent 16 months with Srila Prabhupada traveling on it was his last world tour, and we had about a year here in India at the in March of 1977. Prabhupada sent me back to Australia, and a month later he made me the GBC there. And I did that service for about 7.5 years, up until the mid-80s. After that, I've done a variety of services. I think the most significant one that I did, apart from writing about my experiences, and I was keeping a diary whilst I was traveling with Prabhupada. So as you say, it's been fairly widely circulated. So I worked 4 or 5 years on that. I came to live in Mayapur in 1996 on a permanent basis. By Krishna's grace, we're still here, so I'm happy about that too. In 2009, we started a project in Calcutta the Bhaktivedanta Research Center, and that's running very well. Now it's supervised by devotees, scholars from Mumbai and other places. Me personally, because of health reasons, I had to give up the management of that project, but I'm still there as a trustee. So that's going on. And in the meantime, this last year, I've been working on a second diary that I was keeping just for the month of October of 1977, which, as you know, was the last 6 weeks that Prabhupada spent in Vrindavan. So I was there for 1 month from the end of September to near the end of October. I was back in Australia when Srila Prabhupada physically left the planet. But of course, life goes on, and Prabhupada gave us all the facility and instructions that we need to continue the work of expanding Lord Chaitanya's movement as far and as wide as possible. Prabhupada's ambition was that the whole planet would become Krishna conscious. So we've got plenty to keep us going for the next few lifetimes. So,
very nice. Thank you so much for that. And we'll just take 1 second more on the Bhaktivedanta Research. This project is tremendous. And correct me if I'm wrong. At this point, you have what, 6,000 or 7,000 manuscripts of previous acharyas and their writings, and as part of that library?
More than that, about 18,000.
18,000.
Well, different varieties of books and manuscripts, etc. We have several hundred manuscripts that we went to small temples and other places, libraries throughout Bengal and Orissa. Much of the material that they have is rotting away. There are instructions from Prabhupada in 1972 to photograph as much as possible all these old writings. So we've tried to do that. And Prabhupada also said that he wanted a first-class library in Bombay, because he said the scholars can come and study Gaudiya Vaishnavism, become experts, and then they'll become devotees. And then from them becoming devotees, they'll have more influence in convincing both the academic community and the general public that Lord Chaitanya's movement has all the information that's required to become a full, make our lives a success. So I worked on that for about 9 years because of some health reason. Of course, as I say, I backed off from that management. And now I'm working, I've nearly finished it. I have a 1 volume, which is called Back to Vrindavan, which is based on a second diary that I kept from September 29 till the end of October. So that's still got to be put in print. It'll be going for editing, hopefully next week. So maybe we'll see that in next March for Gaur Purnima. And then after that, I still have 2 volumes of the Transcendental Diary series left to do, and then that'll be it.
Very good. So our topic of Srila Prabhupada, our preeminent Siksha Guru, and we're coming to you for your realizations and for your understanding of this. You and I shared some thoughts about what you might be speaking about before we got on our video here. And I think your first topic has something to do with Prasadam. And possibly from the very beginning, maybe even going back to New Vrindavan or something like that. Please tell us about that.
Right. Yes, I have a series of seminars on different topics or aspects of devotional service, like chanting, deity worship, living in the Dham, cleanliness, etc., etc. So one of those topics is Prasadam, and the reason why I got it, I fished it out tonight, is because Prasadam is not just a question of, eating. Prabhupada actually says that prasadam is the yajna. Eating prasadam and distributing prasadam is the yajna for this age. So it's a very important topic. Prabhupada's instructions, if they're to be borne out, are based on these different aspects of devotional life. So prasadam was a very vital part of Prabhupada's preaching, and it's responsible for the success that he had in attracting so many different people from varieties of social life around the planet. So I'm going to read a little bit about this. If you want to butt in and ask questions or tell me that I'm going on for too long, just let me know. But there's one particular verse from the Majjhīla, chapter 3, which has always struck me as being very important for all the members of Prabhupada's society. So this is text 203. Acharyara Shraddha Bhakti Griha Sampada Dane Sakala Safala Hayala Prabhura Aradane. Excuse my pronunciation. So the translation of that is that in this way, all the opulences of Advaita Acharya, his faith, devotion, home, riches, and everything else, was successfully utilized in the worship of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Now, in the purport, Prabhupada brings in this aspect, prasadam. He says, if one has the proper means and wealth, he should occasionally invite the devotees of Lord Chaitanya who are engaged in preaching all over the world and hold a festival at home simply by distributing prasadam and talking about Krishna during the day and holding congregational chanting for at least 3 hours in the evening. This procedure must be adopted in all centers of the Krishna consciousness movement. Now, the next paragraph has always struck me as being very, very significant. Prabhupada goes on, he says, one should worship Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his 4 associates, the Panchatattva, by distributing prasadam and holding congregational chanting. Indeed, that yajna, or sacrifice, is most recommended in this age of Kali. In this age, other yajnas are not possible to perform, but this yajna can be performed everywhere and anywhere without difficulty. So it's interesting, Prabhupada says that prasadam distribution is the yajna for this age, alongside of chanting. And of course, we know that that's how Prabhupada began the whole movement, not by necessarily giving so many lectures, but by attracting people through the tongue. So Prabhupada, when I traveled with Prabhupada, he often mentioned about the early days when they were living in 26 2nd Avenue, and how things developed on the basis that Prabhupada's main function was at that time to cook a nice feast every week and do the cooking during the day, every day, and about 15 or 20 men would come and join him just to eat. Then Prabhupada says that when they got purified a little bit, then he started giving more and more philosophy, and things grew from there. So this is June the 21st, 1976. Prabhupada was headed for New Vrindavan. You were at the beginning, you mentioned that, so that's the one I started with. And I've written it down here. Although it was a 90-minute drive to New Vrindavan, the ride was comfortable, and as we progressed smoothly along the highway, Prabhupada kept up a running conversation. He reflected on the fallen condition of modern man, telling Kirtanananda Maharaj his comparison of the dogs running on 4 legs and man running on 4 wheels. He said that the only way to save them was to start with the basics, and then after some time, when they become a little purified, give some philosophy. He reminded Kirtanananda that this had been his program right from the beginning. He said, "You all have this experience. This is the only way. I started this movement on this determination. I'll give them prasadam, nice chanting, and they will not come. They must come. This was my determination. And I began with this. So this is the only way. Give them a chance. No talk. Please come. Chant and dance with us and take Krishna Prasadam and go home." So Prabhupada was very practical. He wasn't going to churn out philosophical debates at this point. He wanted to purify people so that they could understand the philosophy. So Kirtanananda reflected that it was just 10 years ago since he had first met Prabhupada. So this was 76. They met Prabhupada in 66. Prabhupada gave one of his endearing little sideways nods of assent. He said, "Yes, I never said that you have to give up this, you have to do that. I never said." Then gradually, Chaito Darpa Namajanam, when the heart becomes cleansed, then a little. There is no hopelessness. So after a short while, Kirtanananda produced some cartons of prasadam from the New Vrindavan kitchens, puris, sabji, samosa, and various milk sweets. I thought Prabhupada would just try a morsel to oblige the devotees, but to our delight, he had me spread out the preparations on the back seat of the car, and he took a little of everything. He enjoyed them, and he encouraged us to take some also. He praised Kirtanananda as a good cook and told us, "So this was my dream, that a place should be there where we can get all nice foods, best foods of milk. Krishna is fulfilling our desire. Everything is there. These rascals, they do not know how to live or to eat. Intelligence is there, everything is there, but simply for want of training, they have become Vrindavan rogues. Make them human beings, your countrymen." So that was Prabhupada's, right from the very beginning. He knew exactly what he wanted to achieve and how to achieve it. And basically, like an animal is tamed by feeding them, in the same way Prabhupada tamed all these wild young men high on LSD or whatever else they were taking, just by pleasing their tongues. And once their tongues were come in contact with prasadam and they got purified, then they could start chanting. So we see this as Prabhupada's principle all over the world. That was how this movement spread, actually. So there's a couple of examples.
Wonderful story. I have a question.
Yeah. Sure.
Was there ever a time, even once, that when Srila Prabhupada had a guest to come and see him, that he didn't offer that guest prasadam?
Not that I know of.
Not that I know of.
The system was.
So tell us about how he would receive gifts as it relates then to prasadam. Tell us about that.
Yeah, at least some arrangement must be there. So at least in India, there was always some darshan in the afternoon. Indian people are familiar with that. Prabhupada would sit in his room and entertain people with talks on philosophy for maybe 1, 2, or even 3 hours sometimes. That was one of the first services that he gave me personally, was to sit at the door with a jar full of pera. It's a sweet that I think Vrindavan is especially noted for. And anybody that came in or went out, Prabhupada insisted that they had to be given this sweet to take with them. So Prasadam was very much a part of his preaching there. And if we didn't have some stock there to hand out to the guests, Prabhupada would be very not pleased, let's say. So that was an important part of his preaching, was everybody must get at least some prasadam, even if it's a small sweet, because a discussion of philosophy, it can be easily forgotten, but prasadam will always act to purify the person. So prasadam distribution is also in accordance with Vedic etiquette, that a guest must always be offered a place to sit and a little refreshment, no matter who he may be. So as always, Prabhupada was the perfect host in holding these darshans. Now there's one darshan that he had in Mayapur. All the devotees had come from the west and other places to attend the festival. And so in the afternoons, that people would gather up in Prabhupada's rooms, eager to get as much association with his divine grace as possible. Many have worked hard all year round, selling books and doing other temple duties. And their visit to the Holy Dham, and especially the opportunity to see Srila Prabhupada, makes it all worthwhile. So March the 12th, this evening, this evening was no exception. The atmosphere could not have been more congenial. Prabhupada was very relaxed and enjoyed the company of his faithful disciples. He is always aware and deeply appreciative of the sacrifices that they are making on his behalf. Although he is our spiritual master, our instructor in every aspect of life, his dealings with us are full of respect and compassion. A few minutes with Srila Prabhupada can change anyone's life. Someone brought in some sweets to be handed out, so I put them to one side. Prabhupada glanced over, concerned as ever that his guests should receive a little prasadam. "Oh, you are not distributing?" he said. So I said, "Well, there's so many devotees, I thought I would give the sweets out when everybody leaves." "They will never leave," Prabhupada said, laughing. And all the devotees cheered, "Jai Srila Prabhupada." So even a few simple words from him are enough to completely capture everyone's heart. So that was, as I say, mainly in India, but sometimes in the West as well. Now, just...
So what about special guests? Were there special guests that got prasadam, and would he sometimes even take prasadam with those special guests?
Yeah, actually, let me just find my place here. There's a couple that I'll mention. There's a lot more, but one special guest that came in March of '76 was Mr. Alan Coleman. Now, those of you that have read about the early days of the movement may know that Alan Coleman was the record producer, recorder and producer of, what was the name of that? Happening Records. So he, at the end of '66, had invited Srila Prabhupada to come to his studio and make an album. So their first Hare Krishna album was made by Alan Coleman. Now, for various reasons, at one point, Alan was a little interested in Krishna consciousness himself and wanted to start some business up with, I think, Gargamuni Prabhu to earn or make money for the movement, and he would make some for himself also. But Prabhupada didn't like the idea of a non-devotee, being part of our money making. So in '76, again, nearly 10 years later, after the making of that album, Alan Coleman suddenly turned up in New Delhi. So it was very interesting, because the fact was that Alan had never paid any royalty to Srila Prabhupada for making the record. And that was another kind of point of contention, I guess. But now, 10 years later, he suddenly pops up in New Delhi. So an unexpected visitor turned up in the afternoon, Mr. Alan Coleman from New York. He produced Prabhupada's first Hare Krishna record in 1966. He arrived with a lady friend, and at long last, he gave Prabhupada the royalties from the record's sales. They amounted to about 1,70,000 rupees, to which he added a personal donation of $2,000. Although not a devotee, it was obvious that he has great admiration and respect for Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada, in turn, was very happy to see him, greeting him as an old friend. He had his guests sit while we fed them sumptuous prasadam. As they ate, Prabhupada chatted very amicably with them and would not let them go until they had eaten everything. He smiled brightly all the while, clearly delighting his guests. He is expert at entertaining and encouraging people to increase their devotional service to the Supreme Lord. So that was Alan. Another well-known guest, probably the most famous person on the planet at that time, was George Harrison. So in the summer of '76, George came to visit the man, and Prabhupada had written him a letter saying that I'll be there at such and such a time. It would be a pleasure to see you. So George agreed. When Prabhupada first arrived in London in July, he was quite sick for 2 or 3 days. He spent most of his time resting in bed. He got a very flu condition, and it really knocked him down. So on July 26, that was the date set for George's visit. And Prabhupada had called me in the morning. He said, "When I'm staying in bed, but when George comes, you wake me up." So I thought, when that happens, Prabhupada will get out of his bed and come into the sitting room to receive George. But actually, he was still feeling quite ill. And so he was resting in bed when George arrived. There's a standing rule that Srila Prabhupada is never to be woken for any reason. But for George, Prabhupada made an exception. I went into the bedroom and informed him that George had arrived. "Yes, bring him in immediately," Prabhupada said. And then, rather than come to the sitting room, he sat up in bed to talk to George. When he entered, Prabhupada had a seat brought for him and instructed us to feed him some prasadam. So the ladies had cooked a big feast just for George. So Prabhupada had them all come into the bedroom. George was sat down on the floor, cross-legged, with a small table in front of him. And then they served him out all the preparations under Prabhupada's direct supervision. So some of the senior men were there. Mukunda was there, Gurudas was there, Balagopal was there, Dhananjaya and others. I hope I'm forgiven for not mentioning everybody. So Prabhupada engaged him in a light conversation as they ate. And that was a technique that Prabhupada had. When you're eating, you don't deal with any situation or talk which causes anxiety. The idea is that when a person eats, he should be meditative, he should be calm, and then his digestive system will work properly, and he should not be disturbed. So Prabhupada was very good at just bringing up light conversation as they ate, and at the same time he was supervising the serving of the prasadam. So noting which preparations George had a taste for, he told us to give him more. At the same time, he kept him at ease with sweet words. "Hare Krishna. Oh, you give him 2 more samosas. He likes them." "Yes. And all the boys and girls," he told George, "are so nicely qualified for Krishna's service." So George expressed pleasure at seeing his old friends. "They're looking better and better off every time. It is nice for me to see Gurudas," George said. "He's turning into a mountain." He was quite portly by that time, by the grace of Prasadam. So George ate steadily, with Prabhupada ensuring that he had enough. When he offered more samosas, George laughed. "No, I've got plenty, thanks." So Prabhupada also laughed. "Prasadam, we can eat it up to the neck. There is no harm. You will never get indigestion. You've got some fruits?" Prabhupada continued to encourage him, offering cauliflowers, mango drink, and other preparations. "Just take a little. George was doing his best, responding warmly to Prabhupada's hospitality. I can't finish, he laughed. He said that he had been sick with jaundice recently, and he had turned yellow, and his liver had been affected. He thought that he had contracted it from eating Chinese takeaway food. Prabhupada advised him to cook simple foods for him, just for himself. So as the conversations want to do, theirs meandered from one subject to another. Prabhupada mentioned our growing number of Govinda's restaurants, and he asked George if he had met Ambarish. At that time, Prabhupada had met Ambarish and Shrutakirti Prabhu about starting up a new restaurant in Boston, and Prabhupada very much encouraged him to do that. Eventually, it didn't get done, but that was his idea. And he wanted restaurants all over the planet so that people would eat the prasadam and be purified. So Prabhupada also filled him in on the successful New York Rath Yatra. We had just come from New York. They had the first Rath Yatra there. Prabhupada was extremely pleased with that. So Prabhupada also told him about the Mayapur project. He said, we are just attempting a big planetarium in Mayapur. We've asked the government to acquire land, 350 acres. Good news is, of course, that after a visit from the chief minister, he allows 700 acres for our project. That's been given a special exemption. So this time in 76, Prabhupada was after 350 acres. We ended up getting twice as many. So that negotiation is going on, he told George. We shall have a Vedic planetarium. Gurudas furnished some of the details. The planetarium will be 350 feet high and show the cosmology of the spiritual world. Prabhupada added, the construction will be like your Washington Capitol, like that. What, a big dome? George asked. Yes, Prabhupada said, estimated 8 crores of rupees. Then Prabhupada offered him some more dal and fruit. George was grinning as he said, oh, very good, fantastic. Maybe just a little bit of this, or no, thanks, that's enough, I'm really full. That's fine. Prabhupada smiled. That watermelon, you can give it. It is sweet. It is water. So Prabhupada asked George if he was reading his books at all. George said that he was, mainly the Krishna book. Mukunda gave me the new books, he said, but there's so much in them. There's just so much to read. I don't know how anybody could have written it. It's difficult enough just to read it. Prabhupada acknowledged his appreciation. He said, sometimes they are surprised how one man can write so many books, but it is Krishna's grace, he said humbly. Otherwise, it is not possible. For a human being, it is not possible. As they chatted, Prabhupada ensured a steady flow of prasadam. Prajumna, give him a little of this one. This one here. No, please, no more, George laughed. I'm really full. I won't have to eat for a few days. So this was the signal for the finale. Sweets, Prabhupada offered. George smiled and conceded. Very well. The sweets will help you digest, Prabhupada said. To the server, he instructed, don't give 3, at least 4. With George protesting that he would not be able to eat much more, Prabhupada explained, 3 is given to the enemy. According to our Indian system, if you give somebody 3, that means that he is an enemy. George was a little surprised. Oh, really? I always liked the number 3. While waiting to be served some fruit, Prabhupada listed 3 enemies, Kam, Krodh, and Lobha, lust, anger, and greed. But there's a lot of good 3s, nice 3s, George said. Prabhupada agreed. Yes, just like Brahma, Vishnu, and Maheshwar, and 3 worlds, Shankar, Martya, Padma, Trinity. So these are nice things. So Prabhupada made one point, but he wasn't going to push it or argue about it. He immediately agreed with his guest's observation as well. So George gallantly tackled the sweets. As he downed one final one, he declared, My compliments to the chef. While we cleared away the small tables and pots, Prabhupada thanked George for coming. He said, I am so very much pleased that you have taken so much trouble to come here. So that's what we've got for special guests. But you can see how Prabhupada used Prasadam as a tool for preaching.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah, he was so expert. And,
so let's shift to current day. Today's ISKCON. And
yeah.
Tell me, how are we doing with regard to Prasadam? We have our preeminent Siksha Guru who is giving us real clear understanding that Prasadam is an essential element of our movement. Are we doing well? Are we sometimes not? Where are we at with Prasadam? How are we doing in terms of following Srila Prabhupada's example?
Right. I'm just going to jump ahead on my notes here a second. There was a Kumbh Mela in 1977 where Prabhupada went there at the mid-January, and his intention was to stay for several weeks. They built a big pandal, and a lot of devotees came from Mayapur and Bombay. So Prabhupada was hoping for a lot of preaching work. But as it turned out, the pandal that we had was not properly organized, the tents, and they didn't have any prasadam to distribute to the millions of people that were coming for the Kumbh Mela. So Prabhupada was kind of not very happy that things were not managed properly. We left early after about 4 days. We got a night train to Calcutta. And on the night train, Rameshwara Prabhu was the Prabhupada's secretary at that time. So Prabhupada dictated to Rameshwara a letter for all the ISKCON temple presidents. So as we zoomed along in the middle of the night there on the train, Prabhupada sent this letter. He says, please accept to all temple presidents, please accept my blessings. Now you must arrange in each temple, there must be sufficient stock of prasadam for distribution. You can keep first class cooks, 2 or 3, and they should always be engaged. Whenever a guest comes, he must get prasadam. This arrangement must be made that the cooks prepare 10 or 20 servings at a time of puri and sabji, and you can add a halava and pakoras, and the visitors must be supplied immediately. Whenever a gentleman comes, he must be served. As the 20 servings are being distributed, immediately the cooks prepare another 20 servings and store it. At the end of the day, if no one comes, our own men will take it, so there is no loss. You cannot say, oh, it's finished. Oh, it's not cooked yet. Oh, there's no supply for cooking, etc. This must be enforced rigidly. The temple is managed by Srimati Radharani, Lakshmiji. So why should there be any want? Our philosophy is, if anyone comes, let him take prasadam, chant Hare Krishna, and be happy. Everything is being supplied by Krishna. Krishna is not poor, so why should we deny them? This should be done at any cost. There is no difficulty. It simply requires nice management. At the end of the day, you may sell or give away. If we believe that Krishna is providing and maintaining everything, then why should we should be misers? This means losing faith in Krishna and thinking that we are the doers and suppliers. We are confident Krishna will supply. Let the whole world come. We can feed them. So please do this nicely and begin at once. Hoping this meets you in all good health. Your ever well-wisher, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. So that letter, very important instructions that there should always be prasadam available whenever for any visitor, whenever they may come. So I don't know, your question was, how do you think we're doing? I think in some places we're doing fantastically well, at least here in India, in between Delhi and Mumbai, they're providing 1.2 million plates of prasadam every day. So that prasadam distribution is going on. Here in Mayapur, every day now we feed about 4,000 or 5,000 of the local villages. This has been going on all this year because of the problems with the virus, etc. People have been impoverished. They've lost their work. They've lost their jobs. So we're feeding them a plate a day, and every day they announce how much has been distributed and to what places. So there's 5 or 6 villages in our immediate area, and every day our devotees go, and about 4,000 or 5,000 plates of prasadam are served every day. So that's very nice. And Mayapur has always been, of course, the recipient of funds from the West, especially when we had the what's the name of that Food for Life program, collecting money in the West and then sending that money. There was a record that was produced that when it was sold, then the Lakshmi that was liberated from the sale, that was supposed to be sent here to India. And especially here in Mayapur, Prabhupada wanted sumptuous, or at least some kind of prasadam must be served to all our guests. So I don't know about the West. I have no experience there. But at least here in India, it's going on pretty nicely.
Great. So we're getting pretty close to the end of our time together. Maybe you could just give us a few final words on the importance of prasadam as it relates to following Srila Prabhupada's instructions. You've illuminated it in so many ways. Maybe just give us a finish up on it.
Well, I was thinking about something else. Maybe I can say that.
Yeah, go ahead. It's fine.
This is a strategic planning initiative. Is that right?
Well, in general, we're the strategic planning team, and
right.
Yeah.
So I do want to say that when you first started this restructuring or re-education, or improvement of ISKCON by the SPT, is it?
That's right.
I was quite cynical. I was in America at the time, I think, and I read some proposals, that the GBC should take up reorganizing what they were doing, and I was quite, kind of cynical that they would. I thought it was just going to be a lot of talk and nothing else, as we'd already seen for years and years, with no improvement. About 4 or 5 years later, I was in Bombay, and you were having your meeting with the GBC and your SPT team, and I was actually quite shocked to see the mood of cooperation and the attitude of the GBCs in being eager to learn how to improve their preaching. I remember when I was on the GBC, there was not one day that went past in our meetings when somebody didn't get upset, start shouting at everybody, and stomp out of the room, only to return later on in the day with their heads down, of course. We even had a wax candle. In those days, it was popular amongst some of the temples to sell this paraphernalia.
Yeah, candles, right.
Candles. So we had them in Australia, and I brought to the GBC meetings one year, I think maybe 82, I brought one of these candles in the shape of a dog, and whenever anybody got, too energetic in their discussions, we would give them the Mad Dog Award. So we've come a long way since then, thank God. GBC meetings in those days were quite let's say they were the opposite of subdued. But so the work, my heartfelt feeling is that the work that you're doing is vital for the survival of ISKCON, not just maintaining it, but enlivening it, all the members, to go out and continue spreading Krishna consciousness all around the world. I think that actually you've done quite a brilliant job in giving shape and form as the movement grows bigger and bigger. I mean, we have millions of people now coming through our temples. Somehow or another, you've been able to get, civilize the GBC and the devotees. And it's really impressive. I really think that Krishna's working through the SPT to make sure that this movement doesn't collapse and crumble away. It's played a vital role. I think the role is going to increase, just like this seminar that you're doing now, or these interviews that you're doing now. These are very, very important, that devotees understand, where we're coming from, what we have to do, and where are we going. So I want to personally thank you, because actually you're the guy that's made all of this possible. I think that
I think maybe we've gone far on this. Actually, the fact is, it's a large team of devotees, and I'm just one of them. And second is that we're very grateful to the GBC that they are engaging us and allowing us to do some service that might be helpful. So really, we're not really leading. We're just serving. And if we are doing anything, maybe we're pushing a little bit from behind. His Holiness Bhakti Churu Maharaj would often say that the strategic planning team doesn't lead us. We have always taken the attitude that we push from behind. So that's our position. We're behind, not in front.
Well, whatever
we have run out of time, Hari Sorry Prabhu, and we have another session coming up at 7. So I want to thank you so much for illuminating this topic and speaking so nicely. It's been really wonderful spending time with you. And of course, personally, the nice comments that you offered. I feel the best thing to say is all glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Yes, it's Prabhupada's mercy that we're all pushing on with. So, all right. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Happy to speak. Hare
Glories
Krishna.
to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
Jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai. Okay, I think that went very well, Prabhu.